The pirate operating systems, modified Windows. In the early 2000s, the pirate OS was the king of the BitTorrent underworld, transforming standard software into digital contraband. These weren't just stolen copies of Windows XP or 7, they were pre-activated custom ISOs like Windows XP Black Edition or Tiny 7. Developers stripped out the activation WGA checks, allowing users to bypass Microsoft's licensing entirely. However, the illegality went deeper than just skipping a $100 fee. These versions often came bundled with wearares, thousands of dollars worth of cracked Adobe and Office software, making the ISO itself a massive legal liability for anyone hosting or distributing it. For the average user, the appeal was a de-bloated experience that ran faster than the official retail version, but the danger was invisible and predatory. Because these OSs were distributed through unofficial, unverified channels, they were frequently injected with rootkits or trojans that allowed the original uploader to monitor your keystrokes or recruit your PC into a massive botnet for DDoS attacks. To Microsoft, these were a violation of the DMCA and their End-User License Agreement, EULA. To the user, it was a dangerous gamble. You got a faster, free computer, but you essentially handed the physical keys to your digital identity to a nameless hacker on a dark web forum. The forbidden desktop, the Hackintosh era. The Hackintosh movement is perhaps the most famous example of hardware-based illegality in computing history. Apple's EULA strictly forbids installing macOS on any non-Apple hardware, a policy they defend with an iron fist. While many hobbyists did this for personal curiosity, it became a massive federal legal battle when a company called Psystar Corp began selling OpenMac's generic PCs pre-installed with macOS. They argued that under the first sale doctrine, once they bought the software, they should be able to run it on whatever hardware they chose. Apple's legal team launched an all-out assault, citing the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, DMCA. They argued that Psystar was circumventing the technical protection measures, TPMs, that locked the software to Apple's proprietary firmware. The courts eventually sided with Apple, ordering Psystar to stop production and pay millions in damages, effectively making the commercial sale of Hackintoshes a crime. Today, the Hackintosh community still exists in a grey area. As long as you aren't selling the machines, Apple mostly ignores individual users, but the software itself remains a contraband entity when separated from the aluminum body of a MacBook. It is an operating system defined by a legal boundary that Apple spends millions of dollars to defend every single year. Darknet and cartel shadow OSs. When the world's most powerful cartels need to communicate, they don't use WhatsApp, they use custom-built, illegal operating systems designed for silence. Systems like EncroChat and Sky Global were modified versions of Android, stripped of every standard feature that could lead to a compromise. The microphones, GPS, and cameras were physically removed from the devices at the hardware level, and the OS was rebuilt to only support a heavily encrypted messaging platform. These phones were sold for thousands of dollars via black market subscriptions, marketed as untraceable. The illegality here wasn't just about the software, it was about the criminal intent baked into the code. In 2020, European police forces managed to hack the EncroChat servers, gaining live access to the communications of thousands of criminals. This led to the realization that the OS was designed specifically to facilitate drug trafficking, hits, and money laundering. When the FBI launched its own honeypot OS called Anom, they proved that an operating system could be a double-edged weapon. These shadow OSs are now the primary targets of international RICO investigations, as the mere act of possessing a device running this software is often considered probable cause for a high-intensity police raid and immediate seizure. The Stolen Core, Apple's Marklar project. For years, a legend circulated in Silicon Valley about a secret version of OS X that ran on Intel processors back when Apple only officially used PowerPC. This was the Marklar project. It was a break glass in case of emergency OS, developed in total secrecy within the walls of Cupertino. The illegality began when versions of this internal-only code were leaked to the public. Hackers realized that if Apple could run OS X on Intel, so could they, and the Stolen Core became the foundation for an entire underground industry. This leak gave birth to the OS X86 project. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a massive violation of trade secrets and proprietary code. Developers were using proprietary Apple kernel extensions, KEXTs, that were never meant for public eyes or generic hardware. Whenever a new version of OS X was released, Apple would include system killers, malicious adjacent code designed to brick any machine that wasn't an official Mac. The community responded by creating distros like IPC and Caliway, which were effectively stolen, Frankenstein versions of Apple's core technology. To this day, the Marklar leak remains one of the most significant intellectual property breaches in computing history. proving that even the most guarded corporate secrets can't stay hidden once they've been compiled into a bootable kernel. The weaponized kernels, cyber warfare. Most operating systems are built to help you work. Some are built to destroy physical infrastructure. Weaponized kernels are specialized environments used by state actors to deploy devastating malware like Stuxnet. Stuxnet was a worm designed to sabotage Iran's nuclear program, but it required a very specific, modified Windows kernel to operate undetected within industrial control systems. These OS environments are often classified as dual-use technology under international law, meaning they are regulated with the same severity as missile guidance systems or chemical weapons. In the hands of a civilian, possessing the source code for these offensive OSs can lead to federal charges under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. These systems are designed to bypass air-gapped security, meaning they can jump from a USB stick into a computer that isn't even connected to the internet. They use zero-day, exploits vulnerabilities that the manufacturers don't even know exist yet. Because these OSs are essentially digital skeleton keys for the world's power grids and water systems, their distribution is strictly monitored by global intelligence agencies. They are the only operating systems in the world that can be legally considered munitions rather than software, making their possession a matter of national security. The dark side of Linux, Bandistros. Linux is synonymous with freedom, but freedom has its legal limits when it crosses into cyber terrorism. Some Linux distributions are banned in various countries because they include global decryption tools by default that violate local anti-hacking statutes. For example, Anonymous OS, which claimed to be developed by the hacktivist group, was quickly flagged as a malware-laden trap. However, more legitimate penetration testing distros like Kali Linux or Parrot OS often walk a razor-thin line. In countries with strict anti-hacker laws, simply having these tools installed on your laptop at a border crossing can be interpreted as intent to commit a crime. The most cursed example was Bebian, Justin Bieber Linux. While it started as a meme, it faced legitimate legal threats for trademark infringement and the unauthorized use of a celebrity's likeness. More seriously, some distros are built specifically to bypass state-mandated firewalls in places like China or Iran. These censorship bypassing OSs are strictly illegal in those territories. Using them isn't just a violation of a software license, it's a political act that can lead to life imprisonment. When Linux is used to dismantle a government's control over information, the OS itself becomes a contraband entity in the eyes of the state, turning the user into a digital insurgent. The leaked betas, Windows XP source code. In 2020, the unthinkable happened. The full source code for Windows XP was leaked onto 4chan. For decades, this code was the most guarded secret in the tech world, the foundation of Microsoft's empire. Once it was public, it became illegal software in its purest form. Using this code to compile your own version of Windows is a direct violation of Microsoft's trade secrets and copyrights, yet it triggered a massive underground development scene. The leak allowed hobbyists to see exactly how Windows handles memory, security, and networking at the lowest level. While fascinating for historians, it was a nightmare for security experts. Because modern Windows 10 and 11 still share some legacy code with XP, the leak provided a roadmap for hackers to find new vulnerabilities in modern systems. There are now underground versions of XP being developed by the community that include modern updates, but because they are built from stolen source code, they can never be legally hosted on sites like GitHub or SourceForge. These Franken OSs exist in a permanent state of legal limbo, too old to be supported, too stolen to be allowed to exist, yet kept alive by a community of digital outlaws. The Vanishware, the Sony Rootkit. The final tier of illegal software isn't something made by hackers in a basement, but something made by a billion-dollar corporation. In 2005, Sony BMG included a piece of extended copy protection XCP software on millions of music CDs. When you put the CD into your computer, it didn't just play music, it secretly installed a rootkit that took control of your system. This software hid itself from the OS, could not be uninstalled by standard means, and created a massive security hole that other viruses could exploit to hide from antivirus software. The Sony Rootkit was essentially an illegal, stealth operating system that hijacked your computer's kernel without your consent. It was so invasive that it triggered massive class action lawsuits and was eventually classified as malware by every major security company. Governments around the world stepped in, declaring that Sony had violated computer privacy laws and exceeded the legal limits of copyright protection. A judge eventually ordered a global recall, and Sony was forced to provide tools to delete the software they had forced onto people's machines. It remains the ultimate example of vanishware software so legally toxic and ethically bankrupt that the courts literally ordered it to be erased from history, turning a corporate giant into a convicted digital offender.